Getting back to Amphibia again this week, I want to be absolutely clear before I go into these reviews. I still really like this show. I think it's a great show overall. And I definitely feel like the second of the 2 episodes that I'm going to be talking about today was necessary for the show overall. At least as far as I could tell the direction the show's going. But especially after the last 2 episodes we got last week, I don't understand why we needed the first of these. And especially if they had planned to make this one too, I don't understand why we needed aspects of those other 2 either. I understand that right now we're trying to characterize the new Sasha, and that's important. I wanted to see that. I also understand that we're trying to establish the new status quo, and that's also important. But you know what? You know what the first of the new Return to Amphibia episodes did? It established that. Like, I know this is a kid's show, and kids of this generation might not have a lot of exposure to various media properties that deal with this sort of guerrilla warfare thing. But it's not that hard to pick up on that these people now are fighting, and they have to do it from hiding, and so it's difficult. Maybe I could see last week's second episode being necessary too, to show the main state of how missions are carried out now. But I absolutely do not understand why we needed Sasha's angels. Like, I get that last week we dealt very much with main characters, and that Sasha's angels was us checking in with some of the minor characters. And there was cool stuff in here, don't get me wrong. Like, all of the cool potion-y magic stuff was pretty neat. But why did we need an episode centered on Toadie, of all people? In this episode, Toadie is part of a special forces group that is captured, even though Sasha and Anne went with them to take down a group of evil anarchists, which I didn't like also because this episode seems to prescribe to the stereotype that all anarchists are just chaotic ruffians, which is just objectively not true. But that's entirely beside the point. That's a tangent I don't want to get lost on. And rather than go in and storm the place along with Anne, Sasha holds Anne back and says she trusts her people to get out on their own. And meanwhile, Toadie, who has been kind of the one who organizes team meetings and stuff, is trying to find his place in the group because the others seem to think that he can do so much more than just hand out post-it notes and pencils. And so I thought clearly he was going to realize that his role on this team was to organize the others. And that's kind of what happened. But then he also, starts throwing post-it notes and pencils like ninja stars. And it was stupid. I know the action in the show can get ridiculous and over the top sometimes, but that was just completely unbelievable. There was no need for him to have to be that physically involved in the fight. He could have just been the brains of the group, and that would have worked fine. And just real quick, a little bit of a fun fact for those who didn't realize it yet. I don't really care about Toadie. He's interesting enough, but I think he's kind of creepy and weird. I care about the mayor more than I care about Toadie. And so I'm just spending this entire episode sitting here thinking, 1, I wish this wasn't about Toadie, and 2, I wish this was focusing more on the B plot, which was Anne and Sasha outside the camp sparring, while Anne picks at Sasha, thinking that Sasha doesn't care enough about her people, and Sasha just standing there and not saying anything like, hey, I know what I'm doing, and explaining herself. In fact, after the previous episode where Sasha was shown to be a really good leader, teaching her troops through their mistakes without actually sitting back and letting them fail because she was watching the entire time, this episode made her seem like super laissez-faire and bad. Yeah, everything worked out and she was right. They were able to get the ball rolling on their escape, and then she and Anne swooped in to help sink the basket. But she didn't tell Anne that that's what she was planning to do, and she apparently didn't tell Toadie what his assigned role was on this special ops team. When in the last episode, she was very clear about who was supposed to go with who, specifically because they fulfill different roles. I can't imagine that she wouldn't have realized that Toadie was having trouble understanding what he was here for and told him. The only reason that she had to tell Sprig and Ivy again after their mission was over is because they weren't listening the first time because they were so up in each other's stuff. And whereas in the previous episode, she was watching everything from afar the entire time, so she knew that they weren't actually going to fail, This time she's hanging out with Anne, sparring with Anne instead of watching through her binoculars again. It doesn't make sense based on her behavior in the previous episode and actually pokes holes in her characterization. I did not like Sasha's Angels much at all. I think it was a wasted episode slot in a show that doesn't have many episodes left to begin with. Ohmtown Road was better, though, the second of these two episodes. And it sees us return to the Quarreller's Pass to meet up with the conjoined twin Ohms again, who imply through some dialogue that they wouldn't have actually eaten the kids last time, that was just them being intimidating. And we find out why they're there, that they were banished from the home city of Ohms underneath the ground. And we see, as our heroes are heading down into Quarreller's Pass to try to gain access to this place, with the help of those siblings, whose names I cannot remember. I will have to look that up in a minute. I want to finish the point I'm making first. Andreas has set up a gem kindergarten so that he can drill down and try to find the seams. It looked like a kindergarten, didn't it? With like the drill machine and the high canyon walls. I wasn't the only one who saw that, right? Lysel and Angwin, yeah, I remember that now that I read it. So they go down there to try to get help from Lysel and Angwin because Anne finally remembered about that message they saw on the pottery mentioning the Mother of Ohms. And who else would know who the Mother of Ohms is than the only Ohms anyone's ever seen in recent memory, right? So we find out that Lysel and Angwin were banished from their home because they suck. They screwed up a watch or something. It doesn't really matter. The point is, they're basically Jar Jar Binks. Which I say that realizing that means that I probably hate them, but I don't. They were actually really cool in this episode. They were Jar Jar Binks in their circumstance, not in their characterization. But they get down there, and the leader of their civilization, Proteus, is just also the worst, but in completely different ways. She was supposed to be feminine, right? Her voice made it a little hard to tell. But they don't like outsiders, first of all, so she doesn't trust the outsiders, and she doesn't trust Lysel and Angwin either because, again, they suck. They were banished for sucking. And she doesn't believe that there's a threat, and she sees no reason why she should let these strangers in to meet the Mother of Ohms. Which is a thing. The Mother of Ohms is a thing. Like, just, they could go there right now if people weren't being so resistant to the idea. And this all gets Sasha up in arms because she believes that everyone deserves a second chance, drawing from her own experience. And when I mentioned that this recent run of episodes has been characterizing the new Sasha, this is definitely the best of that. She trusts Lysel and Angwin basically before everyone else, and they follow her lead in then trusting them subsequently. And she's so up in arms when she realizes that their people will not give them a chance to redeem themselves, to prove themselves, because she can see in them how much they want to be better, how much they want to be accepted again, which is exactly what Sasha had to deal with as of realizing how badly she'd screwed up here in Amphibia. And likewise back on Earth prior to all of this Amphibia stuff. She draws from her own experiences and applies that to these unfortunate people. And then she fights for them. She argues for them. She advocates for their benefit. And when the Ohms refuse to recognize the threat that they're under, even though their civilization is facing multiple unusual earthquakes that can only be because Andreas is trying to drill down to them, she and the others who came with her, as well as Lysel and Angwin, go and try to repel Andreas' forces and save the Ohms, even though the Ohms aren't willing to help them. Like, yes, they're hoping that they can prove themselves, but, like, there's no guarantee of that. They're just doing a good thing. And Lysel and Angwin almost sacrifice themselves, stopping the drill. It still falls through into the city, but stopping the drill from doing untold amounts of additional damage. And even then, the Ohms aren't ready to see them as anything other than the failures they've always been and accept them again until Sasha stands up to them again and earns the respect of Proteus. And this episode was absolutely necessary, I think. This showed us a side of Sasha and her characterization that we couldn't have gotten anywhere else. Like, going back to Sasha's Angels again for a minute, What did that episode tell us? Really, through her interactions with Anne, we learn that she does care about the people under her command, and we see that she trusts them in how she allows them to find their way out of the dangerous situation that they're in, mostly on their own. But we had already gotten that. We had already gotten that in the previous 2 episodes. We know that Sasha cares about them because she took command back, even though she didn't want it, in order to save not just Anne, but some of her soldiers. And we know she trusts them because she didn't call off the mission when Sprig and Ivy almost screwed it up. She watched and made sure things were still going to go okay, and then let them carry out the mission on their own. But here, in this episode, in Ohmtown Road, we see that Sasha has changed enough as a person that she can recognize when other people are in not identical circumstances to hers, but similar enough circumstances that she can advocate for them via her own experience. And she's now willing to do so. She's willing to go, like they need something from the Ohms. I want to be clear about that. But that doesn't come up when she's defending Lysol and Angwin. She just defends them because she sees that they deserve and need defending. And it is the fact that she has changed to this degree in this way that earns them access to the Mother of Ohms coming next episode. But this episode, this bridge to that, especially considering the fact that Ohms must be secretive if they still exist because we haven't seen any yet, was necessary. It was necessary to bridge what came before to what is going to come after. And you definitely get the sense that things are going to start picking up from this point forward, and I certainly hope that they are, because while these last 3 episodes, what were they called? Sprivey and Commander Anne and Sasha's Angels, they all had good moments to them. They were kind of a slog, especially compared to some of the episodes that we got in Amphibia prior to all the Earth stuff. Like, I'd seen people in the fandom saying that Amphibia lost its luster when they went to Earth. And there were some slow episodes during the Earth part, but I mostly disagreed. I'm almost to the point of seeing it now. And I certainly hope it stops being true immediately, because things are, as they appear, going to pick up. But I still don't understand why all 3 of those episodes were needed. I feel like you could have gotten the point that all 3 of those episodes made across in like one episode, if you were careful with your time and budgeted it well. Still, Ohmtown Road was, I think, strong enough as an episode that it made up for that, at least mostly. And I'm looking forward to what comes next. This got me pretty psyched for what comes next. Still, as much as it pains me to say this, because I haven't felt like it was appropriate to say this since some episodes in Season 1, I feel like you could skip these last 3 prior to Ohmtown Road and be fine, honestly. Like, watch Commander Anne maybe, then skip the next 2. Or something, right? It sucks, but that's just how I feel about it. As per usual, though, guys, what did you think of Sasha's Angels and Ohmtown Road? If you have seen them, let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video and share it with anyone else who think would enjoy my content. Though I wouldn't be surprised if you can't think of anyone today, because I've been very disorganized with my thoughts on this one. Subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out links to my various social medias, as well as the many ways you can help out the channel. Those will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.